Okay, so we're going to start with a demo of the block that's up here in this corner. First step of every drawing is to tape our drawing down, and then that next step is always to lay out our title block. So what I'm going to do is line up my T-square, always making sure that I have my T-square flat against my drafting board's edge. And I'm just going to line my paper up nice and flush with the edge of the T-square. It's always also a good idea to kind of tape your paper towards like the middle of the board. That way your T-square can just move a little bit freer. And I'm just going to tape down my corners. And as I tape, I'm just trying to hold the T-square down so that this way the paper just doesn't shift as I tape it. And then once I have those top corners done, I can move it out of the way and tape the bottom corners. Occasionally your T-square is going to get snagged on the pieces of tape, so you'll see that in some of the drawings. It's just something that happens. Not really too many ways to avoid it, but it's not the end of the world. So now that I have my paper taped down nice and straight, and what I can do is just move my T-square and my triangle around on my paper, and those will make my parallel lines and my perpendicular lines, and my paper itself is not going to move. So now I'll lay out my title block, and I'm just going to use my ruler to make measurements, but I don't actually ever use the ruler to draw lines. So I'm going to measure 1/4 inch from the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to kind of make little notes of where those measurements would be. 1/4 inch on each side. And then I'll just draw. You should be doing this lightly and with an H pencil preferably. I'm going to do it a little bit darker just so that way I can ensure that it shows up in the video. But just kind of be known that these are guidelines, so that way I can make sure all of my corners meet. And so again, whenever I'm using my T-square, I'm always just kind of yanking it against the edge to make sure it stays nice and flush. And then whenever I use my triangle, I'm kind of pinching it against the T-square while still pushing the T-square against the board to help make sure that it also is staying flush and giving me nice perpendicular lines. So now I've got my border, and I'll just add in my title block. So my title block is 1/2 inch up from the edge of the border. And then I'm going to lay out the different little areas of my title block for me to put the drawing name, my name, the date, the scale. We'll look at that a little bit more at the end of this video. So I'm just going to lay it out. And I have all of the amounts memorized because I've done a lot of these practices. So it's just 4 inches, 3 inches, 2, 1.5. And the way I do it is I just lay it all out on the ruler at one time, and I make a mark at 4, a mark at 7, 9, 10.5. Because then that makes this box 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. 7 plus 2 is 9. 9 plus 1.5 is 10.5. So that way I can just kind of mark those out a little bit faster. In the next demo, I'll show you how I can kind of speed run the title block. So I'm just, again, using my tools to draw all my horizontal lines, all my vertical lines. Never actually do I just freehand any of this. So now I've got my border, my title block ready, and I'm going to lay out the front, top, and side view of that shape there. So I'm always going to start with the front in the lower left corner, and I'm just going to pick a place. I don't necessarily measure this. I usually go about 1/2 inch or like 3/4 of an inch off from the border's edge. And this is just going to be the guideline to start mapping out where my object is. So I'll just draw a guideline straight out and a guideline straight up. And this is the same as, and I actually have a physical block of this made too. So this corner right here is the same as this corner on my object. And all I'm going to do for my front view is just lay out the overall dimensions of it first. So overall, what is its length and what is its height? Because our front view shows us the length and the height. And so I can see from that little picture, it has an overall length of 6. And so I'll just, on that line, make a mark at 6. And we have an overall height of 2. So on that mark, or on that line, I'll make a mark at 2. And I'm going to, again, bring this guideline further than I need it to go, so that this way it can help me set up my side view. And the same thing here with this length. I'm going to bring that up to help me lay out my top view, and that this way my views can be aligned. Now to add in any other details for my front view. So in this instance, what I'm looking at right here is just overall length of 6, overall height of 2. But I need to show that there's a difference between this face and this face, so that there's some type of difference between here and here. Now when I'm looking directly at the front, I can't see anything involving depth. So I can't see how far back that goes there. That doesn't mean, though, that this edge doesn't exist in this view. So what I need to do is measure how far up that edge is, and then denote it in the front view. So it's up 1 inch. I'll make a little mark and draw a guideline across. So now I have my front view done. What I'm going to do is just erase a little bit of these guidelines to help you see where the front view sits and what's just guides. And so there is my front. So next up, I'm going to do my top view. And I also kind of, just for practicing, I leave just an amount of space. I don't measure it, but I usually will do it around like 1 inch or 1 1/4 inches. I just kind of leave a random amount of space. And now this right here is the same as this corner itself on my object. However, I don't need to make any measurements regarding its overall length, because I was able to just project that guideline up to show me what that length is. So instead, now what I need, though, is depth. So this object has an overall depth of 3 inches. So I'm just going to measure on this guideline up 3. My guide didn't go perfectly 3 inches, but that's okay, because I can still just measure that mark and then use my triangle to just kind of extend it up. Guide straight over, and let's extend this one up too. So again, anytime I'm using my tools, they're always flat against the board, and I'm always taking this piece and kind of pinching it onto my T-square. So again, with my top view, I now have the overall depth and I have the overall length, but I need to show that there's a difference between this face here and this face here. So just like with the front view, I need to signify that there's this edge. So I can measure how far up this is or how far down it is. It doesn't matter really which measurement I go with, because they're both going to end up in the same spot. Make a little mark with my ruler. Guideline out. And now, and again, I'll erase a little bit of the guide work to help kind of show what the top view is. And I have my top. Now all of these lines here are going to help me project out my miter line to create my side view without having to take any measurements. So the miter line is done at 45 degrees from the top right corner of your front view. So where the topmost line and the rightmost line meet, that's where your miter line is projected out. Uh-oh, hopefully this fits on the page. I might have left a bit too big of a gap for this paper. Oh no, we'll make it. So I'm using my 45-degree triangle. Yours looks a little different. Yours will be this blue one. Both of your triangles are blue. I just like this because it has that handle, which makes it easy for me with my nails. And I'm just going to project the guideline up at 45, and then everywhere these lines meet, I'll just project straight down. So again, making sure my T-square is pushed against the edge of the board, making sure my triangle is pinched on the T-square. I'll just project straight down. In the next video, I'll also go over a technique to make some of the guide work a little easier on this. So how I kind of do it in a cleaner way, which leaves me a little bit less to erase when it comes to all of this work. Because what I was able to do with the miter line is create the side view of my object without having to take any measurements. And furthermore, it's keeping all of my views and all of my edges aligned with each other. So the top of this view is aligned, bottom of it aligned. It's also given me even spacing. So even though I didn't measure how much space I put here, because it's utilizing a 45-degree line, it's going to make a nice square right here, which will leave this same amount of space. So without having to take any measurements for spacing, I have even spacing and all of my views are aligned. I'm going to switch just to a bigger eraser to make this a little bit easier, if I can find my bigger eraser. There it is. So all of this up in the corner should get erased, and that's why it's important to do all of your guidelines very lightly so that way they erase easily. Again, I do mine a little darker just to make sure that they show up on camera. And then I have, oh, excuse me, my voice was going. So here's my view. I'll just outline it with Sharpie to make it a little easier to see my different views. And whenever I go over technical drawings in Sharpie after the fact, I always try to work my way from the top of the page down. That way I don't accidentally smudge. Because if I'm putting that over it, it might smudge things a bit. So, as I mentioned, the cool thing then is I don't have to measure anything when it comes to that side view. Now, could I just go construct my side view myself without using a miter line and just making sure that I keep everything lined up, measure the amount of space I use here and just leave that amount of space here? Could I do it that way? Absolutely. And I've seen students do it that way. Students use that technique just because the miter line confuses them a little bit. My recommendation is stick with the videos for a bit to just kind of help you along and see if you can use it, because it's a very helpful technique. And it is technically the proper way to make a drawing. But when it comes to hand drawings like this, and I know some drafters may get mad at this statement, but when it comes to technical drawings and doing orthographics by hand, it's kind of a little bit of a dying art. It's not something that we really have to do typically, but when it comes to CAD software and then even more 3D modeling software that can kind of create these for us automatically. Let me just get rid of a little bit more of that guide work. And now I have my orthographic of my front, my top, and my side view. So for the last steps, I'm just going to fill in the title block. So you can use your lettering guide from your drafting kit to do this. I'm just going to do it kind of free-handed. I'll give myself a little, just like a guide at the bottom. So I'll give myself just kind of a line to make sure that I'm keeping all of my lettering on, but I'll just do it free-handed. Make sure you're doing it all caps and as neat as you can. And a good way to keep it neat is to not rush yourself while writing. So the name of this is the Rabbeted Block, because it looks like a rabbeted joint. Then in the next box, you're going to put your name. If your name doesn't fit, then you can put like your first initial and your last name, or your first name and your last initial. Then in this block, you're going to put your date of whatever the date is that you did this drawing. In this box, we put our scale, which we write as a ratio. So in this case, we did it at a scale of 1 to 1, which means 1 inch on paper is equal to 1 inch in real life. So we did this full size. And that's what we're going to do for all of the orthographic drawings. And then in this last box is how many drawings are in this set. So how many different pieces of paper are drawings associated with this one particular block. So in this case, again, it's 1 of 1. So this is the only drawing associated with this block right here. And that is this orthographic completed.